We begin with Ukraine's biggest attack on Russia, the biggest in more than 3 years of war and the boldest. They used cheap drones, smuggled them inside Russia and blew them up using remote controls. The damage? 34% of Russia's bomber fleet. At least that is Kiev's claim. What does it mean for the war? And how will Russia respond? We'll discuss that and look at how drones are changing the nature of warfare. Also in focus, the turmoil in Bangladesh. Instead of setting his house in order, Mohammad Yunus is targeting first post. We'll tell you all about it. How Pakistan is running out of water and electricity but wants to mine Bitcoin. How India has toughened its stand against the US in the trade talks. How China is rehearsing for war. An American warning has alarmed Taiwan. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says Joe Biden was killed years ago. What you see is a robot clone. Why is the US president backing this conspiracy theory? What a surprise inspection has revealed about India's quick commerce industry. How floods are wreaking havoc in India's northeast and how Magnus Carlsen lost his cool after losing to Gukesh in a chess tournament. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Israeli attacks on Gaza killed 51 people in the last 24 hours. The United Nations and aid groups condemned the latest strikes. They say Israel targeted Palestinians searching for food aid. Iran says it has nothing to hide about its nuclear program. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi calls his country's nuclear program peaceful. This comes after UN's nuclear watchdog sought more transparency from Tehran. Air India says Pakistan's airspace ban is hurting its profits. The airline CEO Campbell Wilson says the ban has increased costs and could hurt Air India's path to profitability. Germany plans tax cuts to boost economic growth. Fields like research, investment and electric cars could get tax concessions. Berlin hopes this will stimulate the economy and boost investment. And Glenn Maxwell retires from one-day cricket, but the Australian batsman will continue playing the T20 format. Maxwell said the 50-over format was taking a physical toll on him. It was daring but sneaky, complicated yet simple in principle, and deadly but inexpensive. That probably sums up Ukraine's drone attack on Russia. It happened yesterday. We've seen nothing like it before. Drones flying out of parked trucks, Russian bombers engulfed in flames, and even bases in far-off Siberia damaged. How did Ukraine pull this off? What losses did Russia suffer? And how will Vladimir Putin respond? Let's break it down for you, starting with the attack. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said that it took 18 months to plan. 18 months of planning. The first step was picking the targets, and Ukraine chose to be very ambitious here. They wanted to hit Russia's bomber fleet. That's the Tu-95s and the Tu-22s. This is the bomber fleet. As the name suggests, these planes are used to drop bombs, both conventional and nuclear. And Ukraine decided to strike these Russian planes. Now look at this map. See how extensive it is, how widely spread the targets are. One is the Belaya base in Siberia. It is some 4,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, 4,500 kilometers. Another is the Olenia base. This one is located in Russia's Arctic region, almost 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. So these are far-off targets for Kiev. And this is what they chose to strike. And that was step one, locking the targets. Step two, attacking them. Now we are talking about targets which are thousands of kilometers away, as you just saw. Ukraine does not have such long-range weapons, so they decided to use drones. Not military-grade attack drones, but simple FPV drones. FPV stands for first-person view. These are drones with a video remote control, so you can operate them from a distance. In fact, Ukraine has published some pictures. These are the drones they used against Russia. The same ones are used by social media influencers. If you go on Amazon, you could buy one of these drones. Of course, there is a difference. Kiev made them lethal. They used explosives so that the drones blew up on impact. That was step 2, choosing to attack with drones. Step 3, reaching the target. How do you do that? For this, Ukraine smuggled the drones into Russia. Then it smuggled special wooden boxes. Once both the drones and the boxes were inside Russia, they were put together. The drones were packed into the boxes. After that, they were loaded onto trucks. And here's something to note. None of this raised any suspicions. That's because it looked like routine activity. Hundreds of trucks probably crisscross Russia every day. So authorities completely missed the ones that were carrying Ukrainian drones. These trucks drove close to the bases that they were supposed to attack, and then it began. Ukraine used remote controls to open the boxes, and once the boxes opened, the drones simply flew out. It's hard to explain this in words. Here's an eyewitness video of what happened.
Где?
Вот он по траектории херачит. А как их не вычислят, откуда они укатывают?
In total, Ukraine used 117 drones. Each drone had its own pilot, sitting thousands of kilometers away, guiding the weapon using a remote control. And now look at the impact, quite deadly. We have footage of the drone strikes. You can see the drone hovering over Russian bombers, then plunging into them and exploding. Take a look. Russia admitted that some of the planes caught fire, but they haven't given numbers. They also said that 3 other bases had been targeted, although those strikes were thwarted. Ukraine says it hit at least 40 Russian warplanes, 40, and 34% of Russian bombers. That is Ukraine's claim. It says their attack cost Russia up to $7 billion. If true, this is a massive setback for Moscow.
Just now, I received a report from head of the security service of Ukraine, Vasilia Maluka. A brilliant operation was carried out. It took place on enemy territory and was aimed exclusively at military targets, specifically, the equipment used in strikes against Ukraine. Russia suffered truly significant losses, entirely justified and deserved.
The pictures and details make one thing clear. This was an operation like no other. It wasn't about brute force. It wasn't about superior technology. It was about ingenuity. And it leaves us with 2 questions. How has it weakened Russia? And how will they hit back? Well, the intelligence failure is obvious. Kiev says the planning was happening for 18 months, yet Moscow had no clue. Plus, Ukraine had a team inside Russia, apparently right next to a Russian intelligence building. Again, that is just a claim, but if true, it's an even bigger failure. Secondly, there's a loss of prestige. Russia is a major power. It has the world's largest nuclear arsenal, yet Ukraine burnt down their bombers, that too in broad daylight. It's not a good look for Russia's air defenses. And finally, the strategic setback. These bombers have been used repeatedly against Ukraine. They're also key to Russia's nuclear second strike capability. What does that mean? Let's say the enemy hits Russia with a nuclear strike. They destroy Moscow's land-based nuclear weapons. Then what would Russia do? They would use these bombers to strike back, hence the term second strike capability. Russia always considered these bombers to be invincible. They were parked deep inside Russian territory, but Ukraine still managed to hit them. It shows a weakness in Moscow's calculations. And now the ball is in Putin's court. How will he respond to this brazen attack? Most likely with an escalation. On the ground, Putin has already made rapid gains. He captured 240 square kilometers of land in March. 379 square kilometers in April and 507 square kilometers in the month of May. As we speak, there is a push towards Sumy, which is a city in northeast Ukraine. Zelensky says around 50,000 Russian troops have amassed nearby. So this could mean a large-scale offensive. But chances are that will not satisfy Putin. He needs a visible and impactful retaliation, one that re-establishes Russia's absolute aerial domination. It could be a series of missile strikes. It could also be the use of rarer weapons, for example, a hypersonic missile. Whatever Putin chooses, one thing is certain: Donald Trump's peace push is not working. Ukraine did not even inform the US about this strike. They may have kept Europe in the loop, because such an attack requires a lot of support. You need satellite imagery, you need the latest intelligence. It's hard to see Ukraine gather all of this without European support. So where does that leave the ceasefire talks? On life support. Teams from Russia and Ukraine did meet today. It was their second round of talks in Istanbul. They agreed to exchange wounded soldiers and those under 25 years of age. Plus, both sides will exchange 6,000 bodies of killed soldiers. That's 6,000 on each side. What about a ceasefire? Ukraine says it offered an unconditional ceasefire, but Russia says it offered a partial one. That too for up to 2 or 3 days. Meanwhile, Zelensky was at a summit in Lithuania. He once again called for a ceasefire.
We must do everything to make sure diplomacy is not empty. Our delegation is now in Istanbul, and we are ready to take the necessary steps for peace. Naturally, the starting point should be a ceasefire and humanitarian actions, the release of prisoners and the return of abducted children.
Now, just to recap, Zelensky took out 40 Russian planes on Sunday, and on Monday he expects a ceasefire. Is this delusional or strategic? There is no doubt that yesterday's operation was a huge military success for Kiev. It probably will go down in the history books, but so was last year's invasion of Kursk. Zelensky decided to occupy parts of Russia's Kursk province. The idea was to build pressure on Moscow, to force Putin to agree to a deal. But almost 1 year later, Russia has retaken all of Kursk, meaning Zelensky has lost his leverage there. So full marks for out-of-the-box thinking, also full marks for planning. But does it change the balance of power? I'm afraid it doesn't. Russia still controls 20% of Ukraine. It still holds the edge on the battlefield. It still has more weaponry than Kiev. And it also has a lot of patience. Sneak attacks alone will not change that. Ukraine's attack on Russia was bold, a bolt from the blue, not just for Russia, but for the whole world, because it showed how the rules of warfare are being rewritten. This was not a strike near the front lines. This was a strike deep inside Russian territory. Common drones were weaponized and sneaked behind enemy lines. And throughout the operation, they remained hidden in plain sight. So this attack marks a shift. Earlier, Ukraine used large drones with fixed wings, launched mostly at night, but not this time.
117 drones were used in the operation, and respective number of drone pilots were involved. 34% of strategic carriers of cruise missiles on their home airfields were hit. Our people worked in different Russian regions, in 3 time zones. Our people, on the eve of the operation, were extracted from the Russian territory. Now they are in safety.
So this attack was different. It happened in daylight. And this is the weapon they used, an FPV drone, a first-person view drone. It has become the most feared tool in any arsenal. That's because an FPV drone is fast, cheap, and highly accurate. Every military wants these qualities in modern weapons. These drones are equipped with front-facing cameras. They stream live video directly from the battlefield, and they do so with almost zero delay. Real-time video. Their accuracy is high. Their impact is deadly. Their small size gives them an edge and flexibility. These drones are small enough to fly through narrow streets, tree lines, or urban terrain. But the biggest advantage is the cost. One FPV drone costs just about $400. Compare that to other systems. An artillery shell costs anywhere between $800 to $9,000. A GPS-guided one is nearly $100,000. An anti-tank missile costs even more. So FPV drones, $400, are the cheapest option. And they can cause damage worth millions. No wonder they're already replacing traditional weapons. Ukraine faces a heavy shortage of supplies. In February, it was firing some 2,000 to 3,000 shells against Russia, which was only about a quarter of Russia's firepower. Ukraine just couldn't match it. So it turned to these cheaper drones. And by early this year, Ukraine was producing 200,000 such drones every month. 80% of Russian casualties they've inflicted are courtesy of the drones. Ukraine has also targeted the Russians through sea drones. This happened last year. Ukraine deployed 6 maritime drones. They were powered by jet skis. The drones targeted a Russian warship, a guided missile warship. Russia saw the drones coming. It fired at them, but at least 2 drones managed to hit the ship, and this caused massive explosions. The Russian warship was destroyed. This is what makes the drones so effective. They can strike with surgical precision. More importantly, they don't get tired. Every military is now inducting drones. Even the Indian Army has done it. In March this year, the Indian Army bought their first set of FPV drones. They were made in India, developed here. One drone costs around 1.4 lakh rupees. That's about 1,600 US dollars. And it can take out an entire tank. The Indian military has bought around 100 such drones. They also have large drones in their arsenal, the kind that we saw in action last month against Pakistan. I'm talking about loitering drones. India used them to strike Pakistan's military assets, their air defense systems, and their military bases. Pakistan too tried to use drones to attack India. They launched 300 to 400 drones. They targeted as many as 36 locations in India, but almost all of them were intercepted by the Indian forces. Long story short, drones have become a common feature and a critical factor in wars. Militaries want drones that can strike with speed and disappear before detection. Machines that do not put our soldiers in harm's way and leave no footprints behind. There was a time when drones were seen as a support tool, an emerging technology promising to shape future wars. Well, that future has arrived. Drones are no longer optional, they're central to modern warfare. Vantage continues after a short break.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Audacious attacks on mainland Russia in the 3 years since this war began. On Sunday, Ukraine sent over 100 drones and hit as many as 5 air bases deep inside Russia. They claim they've destroyed up to 40 aircraft, some of them in the most spectacular attack called the Spider's Web. Some of the downed air assets include strategic nuclear bombers like the Tu-95s. And this comes on the eve of the second round of talks between Russia and Ukraine, which happened in Istanbul today, but no breakthrough in those talks. We're now being joined by aviation expert Angad Singh to try and get a sense of what was so incredible about this drone attack by Ukraine yesterday, both in its scale and its scope.
There's 2 elements to it. One is, of course, the fact that this is one of the largest and most consequential drone strikes ever conducted in the history of warfare. So there's the offensive element of it. And then, of course, on the receiving end, it's not that Ukraine struck population centers or infrastructure or even military industrial infrastructure, they went straight for strategic bombers. So there's definitely a messaging intent behind this. These are the sort of prize elements of Russia's arsenal, and they have been central to Russia's airborne attacks on Ukraine for the last 3 years and a few months. So there was a messaging element to the specific targets that were prosecuted by the Ukrainians.
But the fact that some of these air bases that were hit were more than 4,000 kilometers deep inside Russia, deep inside Siberia, and this entire Operation Spider's Web was planned for the last 18 months, the sheer spectacle of it, what does it say to you about how this may, if at all, change the course of the war?
Absolutely, yeah. The depth of these strikes is unprecedented. These are sort of cruise missile class of targets and ranges that we're talking about. These would require strike packages of many tens, if not dozens, of aircrafts to prosecute individually. And so to do all this, granted, it took them a year and a half to put all the pieces in place. But to have done this, and in the state that the Ukrainian military is in, without the kind of exquisite weaponry and airborne platforms required to deliver that weaponry available to them, to do it by drone and to do it in this sort of covert manner, deep inside Russia's heartland, is quite shocking.
And finally, drones are here to stay. I mean, we're all...
Let's turn to Bangladesh now, where Mohammed Yunus has declared war. Not on radical Islamists, not on poverty, but on Indian media. We've been tracking his social media page, and recently he's turned obsessive. Look at this post from yesterday. This is Mohammed Yunus's post. He tried to fact check an opinion piece on First Post. It talks about Yunus playing to foreign powers, especially the United States. It also claims that the CIA had a role in Sheikh Hasina's ouster. Of course, Yunus is a true Democrat. He is the savior of Bangladesh's democracy. So guess what he did? He decided to publicly rant against this opinion piece. He says there is no credible evidence to support these claims. In fact, he thinks there is a campaign against him. Let me quote from what he said. Ultimately, this article merely echoes the defeated Awami League's narrative, reflecting a well-coordinated campaign across social and international media to undermine Bangladesh and the interim government. So Yunus says there is a coordinated campaign against him, both on social and global media. Well, let me use his own logic against him. Is there any evidence to prove this coordinated campaign? Of course, there isn't. But as always, Yunus has different standards. Our op-ed writer has published a response to Mohammed Yunus's claims. He has given a point-by-point rebuttal. You can read the whole thing on our website. But the larger point is this. America's role in Bangladesh has been controversial. Sheikh Hasina says they wanted control of an island, St. Martin's near Myanmar. That's the island they wanted. Hasina says her refusal to give access to the island led to her ouster. Now, this claim is not random. The US has always had designs on the Bay of Bengal. In 1971, they asked Sheikh Mujibur Rahman for a base in the region. He too had rejected it. In the 2000s, the reports surfaced again, and this time the US publicly refuted them. Of course, none of this suits Mohammed Yunus. He thinks Bangladesh's history began in August 2024 with his grand return to Dhaka from exile. And his actions suggest exactly that. Yunus has decided to remove Sheikh Mujib from Bangladesh's currency notes. Now, as you know, Mujib is the father of Bangladesh. He led the country's independence movement in 1971, but his portrait has been removed. Instead, the notes will now feature monuments and landscapes. And that's not all. His political party has also been banned. That's the Awami League party. It is now led by Sheikh Mujib's daughter, Sheikh Hasina. Dozens of their leaders have been arrested and jailed, and now the party itself has been banned. So when elections are held, whenever they're held, there will be no Awami League. But guess who will be there? The Jamaat-e-Islami. And frankly, it sums up the new Bangladesh. The Jamaat supported Pakistan in 1971. The Jamaat opposed the liberation of Bangladesh. Many of its leaders also aided the genocide of its people. This is a group with a violent, hateful past, and that is why Sheikh Hasina had banned them. She prevented the Jamaat-e-Islami from contesting elections in Bangladesh, but on Sunday that ban was lifted. Just think about how absurd this is. The party that founded Bangladesh is banned. The party that opposed the liberation is unbanned. Welcome to Muhammad Yunus's Bangladesh. What's worse, he has no mandate. Yunus was supposed to restore law and order. His job was to hold elections as soon as possible. Not only is he delaying the polls, he's making long-term changes. For example, in foreign policy, Muhammad Yunus has started mango diplomacy with China. It used to be a tradition between Sheikh Hasina and India. She would gift mangoes to Indian leaders, to the Prime Minister, to the President, to opposition leaders, sometimes even to chief ministers of Indian states. But Yunus has ditched this tradition. Instead, he is sending mangoes to Beijing. Nobody asked him to do any of this, nor does he have the mandate to do any of this. As for his long-promised reforms, I guess we know the reason behind the delay. Muhammad Yunus is busy finding villains in Indian media. We suggest he spend that time focusing on his own country. Imagine your house is falling apart. Not a pretty picture, just imagine your house is falling apart, no water, no electricity, the kitchen is empty, your family is barely scraping by, and yet you decide to splurge. On what? A high-tech Bitcoin mining center. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, welcome to Pakistan in 2025, a country where the lights are out, the fields are dry, the economy is gasping for air, yet the government wants a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And it has some grand plans. Islamabad says it will allocate 2,000 megawatts of electricity for this plan. 2,000 megawatts. That's enough electricity to power a mid-sized city. In fact, it is around 55% of Lahore's electricity demand, yet Pakistan wants it for bitcoins. The plan on paper is to use surplus electricity. But here's the problem with that. There is no surplus. There is a massive shortfall. Pakistan is seriously short of power, so much so that there are daily power cuts and chronic shortages. The services are unreliable, the costs are very high, and this disrupts the everyday life of citizens. Instead of fixing that, Pakistan wants to make it worse by diverting power to mine bitcoins. The move is being marketed as a moonshot. Islamabad's grand leap into the future, that is the promise. But it's more like a nosedive into another mess. And for a change, the IMF agrees. That's the International Monetary Fund, Pakistan's bailout buddy. The one that turns a blind eye to Pakistani terrorism, but it is raising questions about their Bitcoin plan. Apparently, the IMF wants clarity. And you don't have to be an expert to see how skewed this is. A state struggling to power its hospitals is pledging electricity to digital tokens. And that's only half the problem, the power crisis. The other half is this. Pakistan is also running out of water. You see, mining one Bitcoin takes around 16,000 liters of water, 16,000 liters for one Bitcoin. That's enough to fill a small swimming pool. And Pakistan doesn't have that kind of water to spare. Because look at the state of their rivers. Parts of the Chenab are drying up. 2 of Pakistan's dams are running low, and this is according to Islamabad. Water in the Indus River system is down by 10%. This is after India suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, a treaty that has survived 4 wars and many terror attacks. But not anymore. The Pahalgam attack was the last straw. India pulled the plug, and now Pakistan is flying blind in a water crisis. The timing could not have been worse. It is Kharif season in Pakistan's Punjab. That means sowing season for summer crops. Farmers are praying for a good monsoon, but that's still a month away. So this water shortage is catastrophic. It is great to have big dreams, but dreams built on delusion, that's a blueprint for collapse. Pakistan does not have the basics. Not enough electricity to power its homes, not enough water to grow its food, not enough money to pay its debt, yet it wants Bitcoin riches. In any functioning state, this would spark outrage. Heads would roll, such plans would be put under scrutiny and scrapped. But Pakistan is not being run like a country anymore. It is being run like a fever dream. The leadership is drunk on the future and blind to the present. They're begging for loans while hoping to become the next crypto capital. They say Bitcoin will save the economy, but how do you power a blockchain when the grid is collapsing? So here's some hard truth for Islamabad. You cannot eat Bitcoin. You cannot irrigate fields with blockchain. You cannot attract global investors while you harbor terrorists. You have to fix the basics first. You cannot mine your way out of this misery. Negotiations are a tricky thing, especially trade negotiations. Yes, you go in with a strategy, but it's important to be flexible, to change your tactics based on the evolving situation. And that's exactly what India is doing with the United States. Just think back to April 2nd. Most countries criticized Donald Trump's tariffs, but India did not. Instead, New Delhi began talks. The strategy was to play along with Donald Trump, to strike a deal before anyone else. But looks like that strategy is now changing. Reports say India is toughening its position. It is demanding the removal of Trump's 10% baseline tariffs. Now, these tariffs apply to all imports. They have been retained despite some trade deals. For example, the US and the UK struck a deal last month. The US and the UK, they had a deal, yet the 10% tariffs still remain. But India is not deterred. India is pushing the Trump administration to scrap this baseline rate. Same with rules of origin. Donald Trump says 60% of a good's value must be produced in India. Only then will it be seen as made in India. Again, New Delhi is pushing back. It wants to bring that down to 35%. India is also reportedly mulling tariffs on American imports. Now, this relates to a different trade issue altogether. Back in March, you may remember, the US imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminium. India moved the World Trade Organization, the WTO, against this tariff. As per rules, the WTO notified the US. Washington rejected that notice. They said the tariffs were triggered by national security. So India is looking at responding. Reports say New Delhi could slap tariffs on US almonds, walnuts and metals, like a reciprocal tariff. Like I said, this is a different trade issue, but it confirms a change in tactic. The question is, what has triggered this? Well, the report talks about 3 main reasons. Number 1, Trump's setback in court. Last week, you may remember this, a New York court had stayed Donald Trump's tariffs. The court said the president did not have such authority. He could not unilaterally impose tariffs. I'm sure that verdict influenced negotiation tactics. After all, why give concessions if the policy will be struck down? So that's one reason. Number 2, the world has figured out TACO. TACO stands for Trump Always Chickens Out, TACO. The US media has coined the term. It says the president inevitably makes a U-turn after raising the stakes. He chickens out. And we saw that with China. Trump raised the tariffs all the way to 245%, but eventually he backed down. Again, this will influence negotiation tactics. And finally, reason number 3, the political changes. Donald Trump is not exactly a favorite in India right now. In the middle of India's operations in Pakistan, he announced a ceasefire. He also claimed credit for brokering the truce. India has repeatedly rejected Trump's claims. New Delhi says the ceasefire was reached bilaterally between India and Pakistan. Nonetheless, Trump keeps repeating his claim and taking credit. So maybe India is losing patience. And we see why. Pakistani officials are visiting the US this week. They're looking to strike a trade deal with the US. Think about how absurd that is. Pakistan just sponsored a terror attack on India. They killed 26 innocent civilians in cold blood. And what does Donald Trump do? He rewards them with trade talks and deals. He calls their leaders great men. The question is, did that force India to recalibrate its strategy? I'm afraid we can't be sure. But the fact is, Trump's position is a lot weaker now. He's facing setbacks in Ukraine. He's facing setbacks in West Asia. He's facing rejection in courts. So India would be wise to capitalize on the situation. And now let's talk about Taiwan. The US has issued a dire assessment. It believes China is preparing for war, that China is training, arming, and rehearsing for a full-scale invasion. That's what US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said.
We know, it's public, that Xi has ordered his military to be capable of invading Taiwan by 2027. The PLA is building the military needed to do it, training for it every day, and rehearsing for the real deal.
Xi Jinping has set a goal for 2027. He wants his military, the Chinese military, to be ready by then, ready to invade Taiwan and redraw the map of Asia. That's what the US Defense Secretary says. He insists that the US does not want a conflict, but it won't allow China to dominate American allies. And how is China responding? With threats and warnings of its own, China says the US is, quote-unquote, playing with fire and that it should stop selling weapons to Taiwan.
China firmly opposes U.S. arms sales to the Taiwan region of China and urges the U.S. to adhere to the One China principle and the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques, especially the provisions of the August 17th communique. The U.S. must stop selling arms to Taiwan and stop creating tensions in the Taiwan Strait. China's determination to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity is unwavering.
So China has issued a warning of its own. But why is the US sounding an alarm now? It's because of China's recent moves, specifically the moves of the PLA, the Chinese military, People's Liberation Army, they call it. There's a build-up around Taiwan. Last month, China sent dozens of warships, multiple aircraft carriers and warplanes to threaten Taiwan. They circled Taiwan in record numbers. 254 ships were spotted in 27 days. That's 9 ships on average every day. Last year, this number was at 7. So Taiwan is feeling the heat. It has extended compulsory military service for its citizens. Earlier, this was 4 months. Now, it is mandatory to serve for at least 1 year. Reservists need to take longer refresher courses. Taiwan's defense budget is also going up. It now wants to spend more than 3% of its GDP on defense. Taiwan has termed China's pressure campaign as extreme. It has intensified since last year after Lai Ching-te took over as president. Beijing has branded him as a separatist and has been building pressure on Taiwan for electing him as president. Since 2024, China has carried out at least 7 military drills around Taiwan. And this has raised concerns both in the US and among regional players, like Australia. Their defense minister is a man called Richard Marles. He has asked China to explain its massive military buildup.
We would like to have a greater transparency in what China is seeking to do in not only its build-up, but in the exercises that it undertakes. This is the biggest conventional military build-up that we've seen since the end of the Second World War. And that's been playing out over a significant period now.
China says it wants stability, but stability is not built on intimidation. You don't send dozens of warships to promote peace. You don't circle an island with aircraft carriers if you're looking for dialogue. You don't call for reunification while rehearsing an invasion. and you don't build the region's largest military force without explaining why you need it. Beijing claims that Taiwan is an internal matter, but its actions have external consequences on global trade, on sea routes, and on regional security. China's actions are not defensive, they are in fact coercive, and they're keeping the entire region on edge. Let's turn to the United States, where once again Donald Trump has reposted something bizarre on Truth Social. This time it's a conspiracy theory about his predecessor, Joe Biden. This post says that Joe Biden died in 2020, that he died the year he was elected president. So who ran the country as president? Well, according to this post, it was a robot clone, a clone of Joe Biden running the office of the world's most powerful man. Sounds like a storyline Netflix would jump over. But this should also worry America. Whether you like Biden or not, you cannot ignore the fact that this is being shared by their sitting president. He's putting it on his social media and giving it legitimacy. Although this is not new for Trump, in his first term as president, he made an average of 21 false or misleading statements every day. Our next report has more.
They say you should verify before you repost on social media. You know, check the link, maybe read the article, and make sure you're not accidentally sharing fake news. Just the basics. But those rules don't apply to Donald Trump. Case in point, this new conspiracy theory he reposted on his Truth Social. It says that former US President Joe Biden was executed in 2020. He was then replaced by a robotic clone. So, the 46th President of the United States was executed and replaced with a robot. It sounds like the mother of all conspiracy theories. It's one thing to campaign hard, it's another to say your opponent is dead and that the guy with cancer is a glitchy deepfake. And let's not forget the timing. Biden had just announced he's dealing with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. The former president is undergoing treatment. Such a moment usually calls for decency, or silence, or at the very least, a break from conspiracy theories. But Trump doesn't care. And if this feels like the kind of thing you'd hear in a Reddit thread, you're not wrong. Except now, it's coming from the President of the United States. And this isn't new territory for Donald Trump. He's peddled numerous conspiracy theories, both in his first term and his re-election campaign. First, there was birtherism, the idea that Obama wasn't born in America. That was Trump's starter conspiracy. Then came Spygate, where Trump alleged the Obama White House was spying on his campaign. Then it got weirder. He claimed Biden and Obama faked killing Osama bin Laden and that the SEAL team was murdered to cover it up, or that the 2020 elections were stolen.
We're on track to do okay in Arizona. Our goal is to defend the integrity of the election. We'll not allow the corruption to steal such an important election, or any election for that matter. And we can't allow anybody to silence our voters and manufacture results.
And it's not just the content, it's the sheer volume of Trump's claims and conspiracy theories. By New York Times estimates, Trump made around 30,573 of them in his first term. That's an average of 21 conspiracy theories every single day. And here's the thing about conspiracy theories. You don't even need consistency. One week, Biden is a sleepy grandpa with dementia. The next, he's a hyper-efficient, soulless cyborg controlled by Kamala Harris and NATO. Either way, he's not real. And more importantly, he's not Trump. And that's the point. Every Trump conspiracy is rooted in a single gospel truth, that Donald Trump is the lone messiah in a crazy world. If reality doesn't agree, then reality must be a hoax. The scarier part is how normal all of this feels now. US presidents used to lie in boring ways. They lied about budgets and wars.
I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. I know them both. I will get it settled.
And baseball teams they supposedly loved. But this isn't a lie with a strategy, it's a strategy built on lies. And it works not because it's believable, but because it's relentless. The more outrageous it gets, the more it drowns out the truth. Because in Trump's America, the only thing more terrifying than his theories is how many people believe it.
For our next story, I want you to have a scenario. Think of this. It's raining outside, you are curled up on your couch, you're craving a bowl of piping hot noodles. Thanks to quick commerce, you won't even have to get up. The vegetables, the noodles, the sauces, they all arrive at your doorstep. But now picture the other side of the story. The same packet of noodles stored in a leaking godown. The vegetables kept on a dirty floor and the sauces stored around scurrying cockroaches. Are you still hungry? Welcome to the dark, grim underbelly of India's quick commerce. This industry is worth nearly $4 billion. It is growing at breakneck speed. It promises instant gratification. But behind the scenes, it is cutting corners on safety and hygiene. Fast delivery, but playing fast and loose with rules. Case in point, Zepto. They have a facility in Mumbai's Dharavi. The regulators decided to inspect it. That's the Maharashtra Food and Drug Administration. They inspected the facility. They found some glaring lapses like fungal growth on food products, items stored near stagnant water, expired products beside non-expired ones, and unregulated cold storage temperatures. So the regulator suspended Zepto's food business license in Dharavi. Zepto says it has initiated an internal review, that it is complying with the authorities. But this case has sparked a chain reaction. The regulator, which is Maharashtra FDA in this case, wants to dig deeper. It has decided to investigate all quick commerce facilities. And for consumers, it poses some tough, uncomfortable questions. Is this the cost of getting your groceries in 10 minutes? And are you compromising on safety? You see, India's food retail landscape is going through a revolution. On one hand, there's quick commerce, everything delivered to your doorstep in just minutes. Zepto, Blinkit, Swiggy, Instamart, they've built empires on speed. Stores are multiplying, expanding into tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and investors love these companies. On the other hand, there are warehouses powering this delivery utopia. They're called the dark stores. These aren't your air-conditioned supermarket aisles. They're often under-maintained storage facilities. They're cramped, stacked to the ceiling with food and drink, run by employees hustling against the clock, and more often than not, they operate in the shadows both literally and legally. India has around 3,000 such dark stores. By 2026, the numbers could go up to 5,500 dark stores. And amid this growth, a vital question is being ignored. Where are the rules? Dark stores often escape regulatory scrutiny, and given the rate at which they're multiplying, it may be impossible to keep an eye on all of them. We do have a law, the Food Safety and Standards Act, but enforcement is often lax. Annual audits are rare, surprise inspections are rarer. And what happens when violations are found? The companies get a polite notice, maybe a temporary suspension, but beyond that, there's often no accountability or real consequences. And that is why dark stores are booming. There's money to be made, there's demand to be met, and there's no real oversight. And this is not just about dark stores, in fact. India's relationship with food is paradoxical. We revere it culturally, we offer it to gods, we fight over biryani recipes like they're matters of national security, but when it comes to how our food is made, processed and stored, there's a dangerous apathy. I'll give you examples. Paneer is the most adulterated product in the country. Our spices are under investigation over contamination. Packaged water is now considered high risk, that too by the Indian Food Authority. And street food? Let's not even go there. But the real issue is not that these problems exist. The real issue is that we don't seem to care. India is in the middle of a health food boom. Urban Indians are obsessing over clean eating, protein drinks, millet pastas, gluten-free atta, kombucha. They're all the rage. Except we never ask how clean our food really is. The wellness trend often skips over the most basic idea. Food must first be safe before it can be healthy. And no, we are not saying that quick commerce should go. It solves real problems. It is here to stay. But that does not mean we pay for this convenience with our health. So what we need is accountability, real-time transparency, mandatory hygiene audits, and a proper food traceability system. Like, where did that tomato come from? Who handled it? We need better, stricter laws. Most importantly, a public that demands better. Until that changes, the real expiry date is on our trust. Vantage continues after a short break.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Audacious attacks on mainland Russia in the 3 years since this war began. On Sunday, Ukraine sent over 100 drones and hit as many as 5 air bases deep inside Russia. They claim they've destroyed up to 40 aircraft, some of them in the most spectacular attack called the Spider's Web. Some of the downed air assets include strategic nuclear bombers like the Tu-95s. And this comes on the eve of the second round of talks between Russia and Ukraine, which happened in Istanbul today, but no breakthrough in those talks. We're now being joined by aviation expert Angad Singh to try and get a sense of what was so incredible about this drone attack by Ukraine yesterday, both in its scale and its scope.
There's two elements to it. One is, of course, the fact that this is one of the largest and most consequential drone strikes ever conducted in the history of warfare. So there's the offensive element of it. And then, of course, on the receiving end, it's not that Ukraine struck population centers or infrastructure or even military industrial infrastructure. They went straight for strategic bombers. So there's definitely a messaging intent behind this. These are the sort of prize elements of Russia's arsenal, and they have been central to Russia's airborne attacks on Ukraine for the last 3 years and a few months. So there was a messaging element to the specific targets that were prosecuted by the Ukrainians.
But the fact that some of these air bases that were hit were more than 4,000 kilometers deep inside Russia, deep inside Siberia, and this entire operation, Spider's Web, was planned for the last 18 months. The sheer spectacle of it, what does it say to you about how this may, if at all, change the course of the war?
Absolutely, yeah. The depth of these strikes is unprecedented. These are sort of cruise missile class of targets and ranges that we're talking about. These would require strike packages of many tens, if not dozens, of aircrafts to prosecute individually. And so to do all this, granted, it took them a year and a half to put all the pieces in place. But to have done this, and in the state that the Ukrainian military is in, without the kind of exquisite weaponry and airborne platforms required to deliver that weaponry available to them, to do it by drone and to do it in this sort of covert manner, deep inside Russia's heartland, is quite.
Now let's turn to India's northeast, where rain continues to batter every state in the region. Heavy monsoon rainfall began last Friday. Since then, many rivers have breached their banks. Entire cities are submerged. There are dozens of landslides a day. Schools and colleges have been shut in many districts. Tens of thousands of people are being moved to safety. Thousands of homes have been damaged. At least 34 people have died. So which are the worst hit areas, and is the situation expected to improve anytime soon? Our next report tells you.
relentless monsoon rains continue to batter large swathes of northeast India. The downpour started on Friday and it has continued since. Rivers across the region, including the Brahmaputra, have breached their banks. Now, vast areas are submerged. There are floods and landslides. Access to many communities has been cut off. Several districts have issued a red alert. Schools in many parts have been shut temporarily. Thousands of people have been moved to relief camps and at least 34 people have died. The Assam state is among the worst hit. At least 364,000 people have been affected across 19 districts, including Kachar, Shribhumi, Lakhimpur and Nagaon.
We are facing a lot of challenges. What will we do in such a situation? We keep ourselves awake throughout the night.
It has been raining in Silchar for the last 2 to 3 days. This area of the city is completely submerged. People do not have proper food supplies at their homes. Scarcity of food has resulted in skirmishes at shops.
Mudslides have led to flooding in many parts. Road transport and train services have been seriously disrupted. There are long power outages to reduce the risk of electrocution. More than 10,000 people have been moved to relief camps. And since May 28th, at least 10 people have died in Assam. In the neighbouring states, the situation is similar. People have lost their lives in Meghalaya, Mizoram, Tripura and Nagaland as well. At least 9 people have died in Arunachal Pradesh, where many were buried under the debris dislodged by the torrential downpour. Manipur is experiencing intense flooding as well. The state has experienced 33 landslides within the past few days. More than 1,400 homes have been damaged. The Indian Army has launched a large-scale rescue effort and dozens of people have been moved to safer places. On Sunday, Union Home Minister Amit Shah held a meeting and spoke with the Chief Ministers of Assam, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh and the Governor of Manipur about the heavy rainfall. He has assured them of every possible help to tackle the situation. For now, the northeastern states are on high alert. Emergency teams have been deployed, especially in landslide-prone or low-lying areas. People are being rescued and moved to safety. But amid the landslides, rockfalls and flash floods, the worst is not over yet. According to India's weather body, the India Meteorological Department, there is a forecast of very heavy rainfall across all states in the region at least for another day. In all likelihood, extremely heavy rainfall will also be seen in isolated parts of Assam and Tripura. As the deadly monsoon overwhelms infrastructure and brings life to a standstill, India can only hope that the worst is over soon.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in at the top of the bulletin, where Pakistan Minister Ahsan Iqbal has stated that more than half of the national budget of the country will be spent on debt repayment. A Pakistani minister exposing the economic crisis inside the country. He has also said over 118 low priority, is what he has called low priority projects, have been discontinued. He emphasized that reduced development budgets present challenges to economic growth, public welfare and achievement.